sales and things that we've worked on through the week or in the past, or just need some help on. We're doing things virtually now. As a reminder, if you have things you want to share or join us, please send us an email to sas@knoxmakers.org and we'll get you set up for that. Tonight, we have a few people to show things off. We're going to start off with Isaac, who's going to show us a boombox build kit.
Hello, friends. What I would like to share with you this week is indeed a kit that I put together. Maybe a few of y'all could relate. I always feel more proud of something that I designed on my own, but sometimes a kit is just like really fun to me to put together because I have all the pleasure of the manual assembly, but none of the stress of design and having to get that right. And maybe remember that the perfect Bluetooth speaker is something I've sort of been questing after, and I think I may actually have it now, so I'm pretty happy about that. This first slide is showing you this kit that I recently got, which included a heap of Baltic birch that had been CNC cut for me in advance, as well as all those boxes full of little bits and bobs. So I was pretty excited to put this thing together. If you wouldn't mind advancing the slide. When I looked at the instructions, I saw that there were a couple of different sort of sub-projects to get through before you could do the main assembly, and the first of those was to build the cabinet itself. And I am so wretchedly miserable at woodworking that, even with a CNC milled computer designed chassis, I managed to do a mediocre job, but it does suffice. This image shows you a nearly assembled cabinet. I left the lid off of it so you could see the inside. Those corners in the bottom left and right sides that are sort of segregated, that's where the mid-range speakers go. And so any speaker that's going to play sort of a lower note benefits tremendously from having a sealed enclosure, an airspace behind it. And that's what's happening there is sort of setting those things apart. And then the main body of the chassis holds all the electronics and the tweeters, but it also holds the subwoofer. And so the enclosure is effectively predominantly for the subwoofer. So advance the slide, please, sir. And this was the second sub-project, which I was much more comfortable with, which was you had to build your own crossovers. I thought that was rather amusing that rather than giving you a finished electronic crossover, they literally gave you a handful of parts and a crummy diagram and said, make a crossover. And I said, can do. In fact, rather than hot gluing them to cardboard and doing this sort of wiring in space as they quaintly recommended, I put mine on perf board. In fact, that racy red perf board there is actually specifically designed for making crossovers. I bought it years ago because I thought it was jazzy looking, but never suspected I would build a crossover on it. Anyway, so I put those dudes together. And the crossover's job is to separate the amplified audio signal into the highs, which go to the tweeters, and then the lows that go elsewhere. And so that's a very simple passive electronic circuit that, I don't know, it's relaxing to make. If you would advance, please.
What is a crossover?
Well, I did just attempt to explain it, but apparently I did a very poor job. If you imagine an audio signal that's it's already been amplified, so it's prepared to drive a speaker, but it is the full range of sound. So it includes the lowest bass notes and it includes the highest of the high notes, right? Everything from your bass drum to your cymbals. You can't give that whole audio signal to one speaker and expect it to sound any good. That's one of the reasons why sort of what I would say is like a run-of-the-mill Bluetooth speaker, which literally does just have one speaker, doesn't sound that great because huge compromises must be made. So instead, the nice thing is to have separate speakers that are each individually engineered to sound really nice for a particular part of the spectrum. And so what the crossover does is separate out so you get only the right notes to the right speakers. And so this then is what you have at that stage. You've got the cabinet, the crossovers, and all the other bits. Hey, Joe Pardew's here. Welcome, Joe. Thank you. The exciting part, of course, is on the left where you can see the speakers themselves. This kit, by the way, comes from a company called Parts Express, which is aimed at DIY audio folk. A really great company, lots of good products. And one of the things I really dig about them is they've got really, really nice speakers Not brands you will have heard of before, but they're like the guys who make the speakers for the brands you've heard of, if that makes any sense. So what you see on the left there, there's 2 tweeters, there's 2 mid-range, there's 1 subwoofer, which is the thing at the top actually. And then the thing just under that, the largest one, is a really interesting part that I've never had a chance to try before, called a passive radiator. And the passive radiator is one way of tuning the performance of a subwoofer. So if you simply attach a subwoofer to an enclosed volume of air, it will perform to, you know, whatever specs it has, right? It's got some degree of good frequency response. But if you want to tune it, if you want to, for example, optimize it for some particular kind of music you like to listen to, one way of doing that is taking that sealed enclosure and then making a hole in it and putting this passive radiator in. And the passive radiator is very much like a subwoofer. It's got the moving cone, the suspension that allows it to move, and then the chassis, but it doesn't have any of the electrical parts. That's why it's called passive. It's just free to move as it will. And so what you wind up is with an enclosed volume, an airspace that has some compliance to it. So it's like the volume can adjust dynamically as the speaker plays. And the thing that's really neat about it is that you can then further tune it by adjusting the mass of the passive radiator. So literally it comes with a stack of fender washers, and you just attach some quantity of fender washers to tune it, which I thought was kind of fun. Anyway, other than that, you got, like, you know, screws and knobs and electronic bits and bobs. The business on the right edge, you can see the main board there with the heat sink on it. That's what receives Bluetooth audio. It amplifies the sound, and it's got some knobs that let you tweak it. The red board on the bottom edge is a power control board, and it takes 3 18650 lithium-ion rechargeable batteries, which is really groovy, so that the end result, you know, can be totally cordless and portable. And that board manages the charge and discharge of those batteries and keeps them safe and all that kind of jazz. So mostly at this point, it's just sort of putting the thing together. If you would advance the slide, please. There's a bunch of wiring to do. You know, you got to do some crimping. So there's lots of different sorts of hand skills involved in putting this together, like you'd be in different zones, so to speak, which I thought made it a particularly interesting kit to put together. And I actually went ahead and put it completely together because I really needed to hear what it sounded like, and of course make sure that it worked. But we're going to pretend like I did this in a sensible order. So skip to the next slide, please. So then I've got this wooden cabinet, and I have no idea to do with a piece of wood, right? I want to make it look nice somehow, but what are you going to do? Heck if I know. I did a little bit of reading and discovered a wonderful material I'd never heard of before called Duratex, which is a type of a plastic coating that's engineered specifically for coating flat cases and mobile speaker cabinets that randy musicians use on the road. So it's meant to have the heck beat out of it, you know? And I thought that sounds amazing. And so I bought that stuff, and it's really neat as it turns out. As long as it's not allowed to set up, you can clean it up with water. So it's super convenient, but it's mad viscous. So it's very awkward to work with. And it comes with a little sort of a textured roller. And so you put on a really thick base layer, let that set up some, and then the layer on top of it, you can water down if you want to try and tweak the sort of the texture that you get. I didn't exactly get the orange peel that I was going for, but it's pretty good. I like it all right, and it does feel very very tough, which I'm pleased about. So I painted that material on the outside and let that set up, and then he's got to put it together. So I think that's probably the last slide, is the assembly. Oh no, yeah, so that's the hole the passive radiator goes in, and I just sort of wanted to show you how you have to work through that, because that's the largest hole in the cabinet at that point, which is a little bit awkward, but not too terribly bad. And there's not really that much wiring you have to do on the inside anyway. So now I think is the last slide. You can see the finished product. Just a few little touches. I added a handle to it. I gave it some rubber feet that you can't see in this picture, and weirdly they laser cut the plates, there's a plate on the top where the knobs are mounted, out of clear stuff, which I felt was awkward because you're kind of looking into the cabinet. So I backed that with some glow-in-the-dark vinyl, because we were talking about glow in the dark last week, and it reminded me how neat it was, and that I had that vinyl. So now the thing glows at night, which makes me happy. And of course, the really cool thing, I can't share with you, which is it sounds like angels singing. It's amazing. This box puts out a clarity of high volume sound that you just would not believe. In particular, the bass response is quite surprising. It sounds lovely. And that's it.
Very good.
Yeah, thanks.
What kind of battery life does it get?
Well, I haven't actually exhausted the batteries yet. The internet told me that it should run for several hours, but of course it depends on how aggressively you're playing your music. While I was working on my girlfriend's car recently, on her car stereo, I literally just put this thing in the trunk while I was working in the car so I could listen to it, and played it for hours and hours, and it didn't run out of juice, so it seems pretty good.
Very nice.
Yeah. It was fun to put together, and it's a rare instance of where I've made a thing that I think I'm actually going to get a lot of use and pleasure out of. So that'll be interesting.
Awesome. Very
Yep.
cool.
So thanks, then.
Thank you. All right. Next up, we have Scene to show us the cell box. Scene, are you here?
I'm here. All right. Haha. It's me, Scene. Yes. So I am showing a failure tonight. My current mailbox has a vinyl decal that I made at the space with the vinyl cutter because it didn't have any numbers on it, and people, delivery drivers and parcel people would drive by it all the time. So I made big letters and stuff, and it's on this old crappy metal mailbox that's all dented and the door isn't closed. So I decided I was going to get a new mailbox, and that I had an extra one of these decals, but I was going to try to use them as a paint stencil to then do something neat with. So I applied them on the mailbox. As you can see, I blurred out most of the address so I don't dox myself. If you go to the next slide, I taped everything up, including the little flag. And next slide.
You put the vinyl on first, and then you taped it
Yeah,
up.
I put the vinyl straight onto the mailbox, and I had a white base layer, so I wanted to preserve the white underneath. And then what I was going to do is this was going to kind of be my white stripes mailbox. I kind of just had this weird idea because I just had this matte black and glossy red spray paint. So I said, yeah, I'm going to make like this striped thing with the white underlayer, and I'm going to peel off the numbers and the letters, and that's going to go on, and I'm going to put a clear coat over that to preserve it. So that was my plan. So this is the matte black. It worked pretty well. I did it on a hot day, but it still set up really nice smooth coat. And the next photo. Yeah, and then I put on the tape on the black, and I did the stripes, and then I applied the red, and that came out nice and glossy, and I was real happy with that. And then I was peeling off the tape, and I started peeling up whole chunks of the black spray paint, and I was like, oh, this is not good. So I did a little edging there with some acrylic paint I had, and then I just kind of went over because I had pulled up quite a bit, and even in places where I hadn't pulled up a lot of it, I had pulled up little tiny specks, and so I was kind of peeved, and so I went back and was painting over that. I did spray paint you can't really see it too much, but you can see the lid is silver. I did the front in silver, and that came out pretty well. Even with the tape on it, that stayed up. But for some reason, the matte black, I don't know if I didn't let it set up. I let it go for the full 24 hours, but it peeled off. So I filled it with acrylic, and I was like, this isn't that great, but okay, let's just, proceed forward. Maybe I'll repaint it someday. And then went to go and peel off the vinyl, and next slide, I got that. It peeled on the acrylic, it peeled on the spray paint, kind of just ruined all the nice clean lines that I was going for. And so I didn't even progress. Yeah, and I'm seeing now in the chat, it works peel immediately after spray painting. It pulled it right off because it formed that skin. Yeah, I didn't want to smudge it, so that's why it was my hesitation at peeling them, and especially since I was peeling with the black. I was like, I would have to pull the black first on some of them. So if anybody has any suggestions on how, I was using painter's tape. I don't know if that's not good to put on fairly new paint, if that's peeled it as well. But yeah, so this was kind of a bum. So I'm gonna probably just sand a lot down and do. I have a new plan. Though I don't have any more backup vinyl, I'm gonna cut a new one and maybe experiment with some different paints and stuff like that. So yeah, it has a little grunge, distressed look. Not exactly what I was.
Favorite font.
And then I was trying to peel up the C there in between the A and the E, and it did just make a whole thing across. I didn't get a picture of that. It pretty much tore up. There's no differentiation between the letters there. So yeah, that was a fail box. So I was I've postponed this specific share for a couple weeks, and I've been meaning to actually make progress on the actual version and be like, and then I made it into this, but I didn't get to that either. You can see underneath the A too, where that was where the tape peeled up there, and I painted it back over because it really did peel quite bad in that spot. You can definitely tell that there's a difference in the colors there. So yeah, I'm just gonna sand it all down and start from scratch. I still have a mailbox, so it's not really too much of a rush. But yeah, so maybe in a few weeks I'll have something else to show that'll be a little more classy. I'm thinking for this next one, I'm not even going to bother using them as a stencil. I'm just going to paint it and then I have some really cool vinyls that I bought, so I might do some experimenting and see which one looks the best. Bullet hole defense. Yeah. If it peels now, oh yeah, well yeah, and also I was gonna cover it with the clear coat. I mean, I don't know if that will help, but maybe. I know if I spray it all over, and then the vinyl is rated for outdoor, so that should stand up for at least a while. And in any case, it'll a lot of the times my mailbox is in the shade as well, so that's a little more hospitable. But yeah, so that's the fail box. We'll see if it turns into a success box in the future.
I look forward to that. Aaron. Right. Now we have Sean, real Sean, show us some cabinets.
All right. Is my webcam up?
No, not yet.
Okay. Sorry. There we go. So I will introduce myself. I'm Sean. I'm new here, and this is the first basically real project that I'm attempting. And I've actually not made it into the space to make any of this. I started this a few weeks ago, and then I met Brian, and then I was introduced to your all setup, and thought it was a great idea. So this is kind of the first thing that I've ever built. This is my garage here, and I didn't have anything to work on. And I started out trying to build these kind of built-in cabinets from the floor, and it was just not working out right. And all my tools that I have are borrowed from family and friends. And so I built this bench here, and I made basically all my cuts with a track saw. Okay, so next slide, please. So I am trying to make the built-ins for my closet with some drawer stacks and some place to hang clothes. This is just a couple of pictures of the cut plywood. I'm using 3/4 inch plywood for all of this. And it was just kind of from a back of a sketch that I made. Didn't really have any plans anywhere. Next slide. So I kind of kept having problems with that hose to the saw. That's, I guess, some sort of dust collector. And so I just basically rigged it up to the top of the garage to keep it out of the way. But it seems to work pretty good. It's still not very good for dust collection. So I was definitely looking forward to getting into the shop. That would have been much easier using a table saw to cut this stuff. Next slide. Here is just trying to get it squared up. I bought some little 90-degree squares and borrowing all the clamps. And it turns out that it's pretty square this way. All right, next slide. And here is a picture of a few of the cabinets. There's actually one more, so it should be 3 base cabinets and then 3 on top. And so that's the plywood box. The little small boxes in the middle, those are the base that actually they sit on. It raises them up about 3 inches, and there's a little toe kick area. Next. This is where I am trying to put the face frame on, and the only way that I thought about putting that on was using a little brad nail, but then it leaves quite a few holes that you have to go in and putty. And so at some point I'm going to need some guidance on better ways to join a face frame without marring up your solid wood. But as long as you put enough effort into sanding it down, it ends up turning out pretty good to paint. Next, please. And here is what happens when you forget about a pocket screw. I had just learned how to use a router, and this is with a flush trim bit. And all of a sudden I was routing and there were sparks. And then I looked down and realized that I had run over one of the screws. And so I'm gonna definitely take note of that. But it gives you a pretty good little cutout of what a pocket screw looks like routed over.
It's like a cross section of the screw.
Next slide. So here, that's my side of the garage is completely jam-packed. So I'm parking in the rain now. And so I'll be glad when I get these out of the garage. Next. This is after a couple of coats of paint. I sanded it down and I used some latex paint, and I borrowed a sprayer, and I sprayed, I think, 3 coats of latex paint. I had to thin it for it to even spray out. And then I put 2 coats of a water-based polyurethane on, and it turned out pretty nice. Next slide. And then the next one, just another view of it. And another view. I only have actually about half of them painted right now, and I'm going to be working on installing them next. Next slide. And so whenever I went to cut the carpet out in the closet to install the bases, I took the baseboard out, and the baseboard was wet, and it's on the outside or up to an exterior wall. And I realized that I had a leak in the house. And so actually the chimney flashing is completely destroyed. It's an older house. And so I had the roofing company come out. So I'm glad I found this actually, because now I found another problem that we need to fix. I never would have known that if I hadn't have taken the baseboard off. Yeah. And next slide. My 2 girls thinks that they're elevators, and so they've been playing in them nonstop. And then next slide. That's it.
Very nice. So had you done woodworking before? Was this your first big project?
This is my first project.
Nice. Very nice. And you just drew something up on some paper and went for it, huh?
Yes, I measured everything, and I measured and I gave myself, I think, 3 inches on each side clearance in the closet, and then I'll just try to scribe a piece of wood to make it look, because I want it to look built in.
Tim was asking what kind of joints you used. Was it all pocket screws, or was it?
Well, yeah, they were all either pocket screws, and then I just kind of got lazy, and then I just started using drywall screws and screwing them in, because the screws are not going to be seen. I'd eventually like to learn to use the router to maybe route a dado the joints in, but I just don't have any experience with that.
Yeah, I know we have dado stacks for the table saw too. That's easier for long run. Steve was asking if you had any molds already where it was wet.
Oh, any mold? No mold. Yeah.
Very good job.
Oh, thanks.
Very good. Looks great.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I see the questions here. I did not scroll down. But the next, I think the next project is in front, or right where the girls are sitting. Those are going to be drawers, and Brian said he would help me build some drawers, and I guess also get checked out on the table saw.
Yeah.
So that's the next part.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you for sharing that.
Hey, thanks.
I'm a bit louder now, Billy. All right, so last up tonight is Tracy, who's going to show us attic lights.
So this is a project I did for a coworker of mine. She has this hole in her ceiling going up to the attic, and it's sort of ugly. So she said she wanted a cutout with constellations on it to put up there, and then light it from behind. And she's worked with the laser cutter at work before, but never done any design. And I said that wouldn't be a big deal, so I would gladly design that for her. So if you go to the next slide. This was the design that I made. The circles were cut out, and then the lines in between the constellations were just engraved, but oh, now you're showing that it's a horrible screenshot. Very pixelated. I didn't draw all the tiny little circles. Those are all also cut out, all the smaller stars that aren't part of constellations. But what I did was I grabbed a few of them and made it into a brush, and then just like brushed all over the screen, so it looked more natural, and I didn't have to draw 10,000 tiny
Nice.
little holes in the thing. But I thought that was a good time saver, and it looks, I feel like it looks more randomized. But anyway,
yeah.
Next slide, please. This is what it looked like when it first came off the laser, just holding it up to the light in the arts and crafts area with no sanding or finishing or anything. But so that was the first pass. Next slide. These are the lights my coworker put behind them, just a battery pack of the LED Christmas lights. She said she was looking for one that's remote controlled, so it's not always on, like constantly, but she hasn't found one yet. So if anyone knows of any suggestions, I said I would ask. Battery controlled and also remote controlled LED string. So next slide. So this is what it is installed in her ceiling. I think the dimensions she gave me were a little off, so she had to cut it down a tiny bit. But the last slide is it all lit up. She was going to put some foam around the edges so it would hide that part. And she had talked about putting some diffusion in there, like vellum paper or something like that. But I mean, I don't think it's really necessary. It looks pretty natural the way it is. So
yeah, it looks pretty great.
Yeah, I thought it turned out a lot prettier than it looks. Really nice, I think. So that is my project.
Very nice. I think if you count the laser cut parts in Isaac's, then half the shares have laser in them today tonight. Well, thank you, Tracy. Yes, it did have laser cutting. The top. All right, so announcements for tonight. Billy is going to do some machining classes. The first one is his machining 100. It's an intro to the machining area, and it gets you authorized on which things, Billy? The drill press and some other things in there. Yeah, everything but the lathe and the Bridgeport. And this one's going to be a totally virtual class. It is a prerequisite for the next class, and this one's going to be on September 3rd at 7 p.m. And it's up on the calendar now, right? So you can sign up.
You are now unmuted.
Yeah. And then he's also going to have a milling 101 class, which is going to be a hybrid class, right? The first part of it's going to be virtual. And then you're going to schedule one-on-one times to actually use the Bridgeport and get authorized to use it. Is that right, Billy? Yeah, and so that'll be a couple of days after that, right? The first one was what, the 3rd? And then this one will be the 5th. And so if you wanted to get in the machine shop and get authorized on all the things, that's a good way to sign up there and get it done in a couple of days.
You are now
Are you
muted.
going to do the virtual part the same day as the
You are now
one-on-ones?
unmuted.
Okay, very nice, very nice. All right, and then
You are
just
now muted.
another reminder about the email. If you have a project and you want to get plugged into these Tuesday show and shares, send us an email. We'll be happy to answer any questions and get you plugged in through that. Also, a reminder, we have a few ways that you can help financially Knox Makers. One of them, a really nice way, is the Amazon Smile. It's a passive way to help. I know several of us are signed up. You go in and choose your charity, and Knox Makers is listed as one of the 503c charities, and then everything that you buy through Amazon, a small percentage gets donated and sent to us. I think we get quarterly checks from them. So that's a good passive way. Or if you just want to give us some money, you can go to knoxmakers.org/donate and send it through the PayPal. And that is actually it for tonight. And so if you want to stop recording, we